All right, if everyone can take their seats. We'll wait for Miss Rebecca. All right, good evening. Thank you all for being here. I'm excited for tonight's agenda. So I will call the meeting to order. It is 5:34 p.m. And I don't like really ever do roll call, but I think I have Crystal Carr, Rebecca Allen, Glenn Bosley. Couldn't remember if you hyphenated your name.
Yeah.
And you do.
Right.
And Allison, got Nate. And then who's on? I have Amy. And is Aaliyah on? Yes. Awesome. And Michael. Awesome. Great. We're all here. So welcome everyone. And then I know I have public attendees online as well as here in City Hall. I think Zach was allowing everyone to enter as attendees. And if anyone has public comment on non-agenda items, raise your hand or let us know. I don't think you guys are here for the general meeting, so I don't see anything. All right. And hopefully everyone had a chance to pull the packet. There were January minutes in there. Did anyone have a chance to review them, have questions about it? If not, we just need to have a motion to approve them. Crystal, can I get a second?
Second.
And Glenn, thank you. Excellent. All right. So just moving along quickly. Our next item is board member updates on the 2025 goals. And I know Rebecca finished her article. And we just added a few things to it, and I sent it off to the bulletin and they just asked to hold it until next week. So we're just a week off for this month, but I thought it was a really thoughtful, it was a community voices article. And then I just helped kind of tie in some like conversation around how those were community voices and how affordable housing can benefit a community. So we'll be looking forward to that in the bulletin, I believe next week. And how about anyone else? Did anyone else have updates from the 2025 goals that they wanted to report on? No. Aaliyah, same. Good. Okay. Then I guess we're on to our presentations if you all are ready. All right. We have two presentations tonight, and on the agenda I have Randy Davis. I have you as your first, and I think Zach has your slides, right? You had two. Did you have two slide decks? Okay. And which one did you want up first? All right, fair housing, we'll pull that up. And then Randy, since we record meetings, I'll just have you like pull your microphone and then turn it on, and then you can give an introduction, and we'll be listening.
All righty. I think.
tons more. Lots for everybody. And then I have printouts of the actual slideshows if anybody wanted them as well, but those were just the flyers that I'll be discussing. So, all right, fair housing. Hello, thank you for having me. My name is Randy Davis. I am a community development analyst with El Paso County. I work in the economic development office, and I am the staff person for the El Paso County Housing Authority. And I get to do fair housing stuff because I used to be a housing counselor, HUD certified housing counselor, and I've had tons of training in this stuff. And then our office, not in what I work on housing stuff. We also do community development block grants in our office. And as part of that CDBG funding, the feds make us affirmatively further fair housing. So since I have the experience in that, I get to do the little slideshows. So here's my little presentation about fair housing. Next slide, please. So just a disclaimer, I am not an attorney, so this is not attorney level presentation material. It is true, it's just not attorney level. And I will advise anybody to go to an attorney if you have a problem in any of these areas. Next slide, please. So we do have 7 protected classes when it comes to the Fair Housing Act. So we're protected on the basis when it comes to housing for race, color, national origin, religion, sex, disability, and familial status. But then Colorado has their own anti-discrimination act as well that protects us on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, marital status, and creed. And then the 2 newest, the latest and greatest, are source of income and military or veteran status. Military or veteran status was about 2022, I believe. Next slide, please. But what is not protected? We are not protected if we're smokers, especially when it comes to housing that is federally subsidized. They can say no smokers at all anywhere on the premises, but any landlord can say no smokers. We're not protected in that area. Lack of income. So we can go with a housing choice voucher and get housing. They can't discriminate because of the type of income, like a voucher, but they can still say that you don't have enough of the income. So we're not protected if we have lack of income. Past evictions and criminal history, those things we're not protected on yet. The governor has been working on criminal history, so hopefully that'll be next. And then active users of illegal substances. So if you've had a meth lab in your home and you've got some of that history, that you're not protected on those areas. And the Fair Housing Act, it only counts for landlords that have 4 or more units. We call that, I believe it's called the Aunt Sally doctrine, where let's say you, like me, for example, I want to rent out my basement and I am a single lady. I don't want to rent out to single men, right? That would be uncomfortable for me. I would not feel safe. So if I were renting out just 1 unit, I would not be required to follow the Fair Housing Act. Or let's say I wanted to rent out that unit and I'm allergic to dogs. You can't make me rent out to somebody who has a service animal. You just can't because I'm allergic to dogs. So they call that, I believe it's the Aunt Sally doctrine, if you own 4 or fewer units. Or if you use a management company, you have to follow the rules no matter what. Even if I was renting my basement, if it was with a management company, they would expect that management company to follow the rules. Next slide, please. So discrimination can happen in a variety of ways. Usually what we hear about is the landlord won't let me have a service animal, or they won't let me have an emotional support animal in my apartment, or my landlord won't let me have a parking spot and I'm in a wheelchair, stuff like that. But there's all sorts of other things that could happen, like somebody calls about an apartment and it's available, but they show up 2 minutes later and it's not. That's probably some type of discrimination. Next slide, please. So the 2 main ones that we deal with are the disabilities and when it comes to service animals or emotional support animals. So I cover those a little bit more than anything else. When it comes to a disability, the ADA defines it as something that limits at least one of your life activities. And it's not always obvious. And as a landlord, you're not expected to guess. So if somebody has a disability, they have to tell the landlord, even if they're rolling up in a wheelchair, you got to say, look, I got a disability. I'm in a wheelchair. I need a unit that's accessible. So you don't make them guess. It does not always require an assistive device. There have been times when I could not get around very well, and you wouldn't know it by looking at me, but it was hard for me to get around. So it doesn't always require some assistance. And no matter what, medical records are not required, but referral letters could be required. But the referral letters are just general in nature. They don't say what your issue is. It just says that you might have an issue that needs some kind of assistance. Next one, please. And when it comes to disabilities, a family can ask for a reasonable accommodation. Reasonable accommodations are things that can be done reasonably by a landlord to alter their procedures or policies so that somebody can live in a home comfortably. Like waiving a no pet policy if you got a service animal, or maybe somebody has some kind of cognitive delay and the landlord spells out or reads out a lease to them in general terms. Or maybe your office isn't all that accessible, so you meet somebody at the unit that is accessible so they can get to it. Next one, please. Reasonable modifications are the ones where you're physically altering the property to make it livable for somebody. And some of the examples there, like putting non-slip grip on a floor so they don't slide around, auto shutoffs for faucets, those flashing lights on the doorbells so somebody who's deaf knows somebody's at their door, or grab bars in a shower. When it comes to these modifications, tenants sometimes have to pay the cost for those. Usually the only ones that are covered are if they're living in federally subsidized properties, then the landlord has to take care of those, but everybody else, the tenant usually pays for those modifications. And then they have to realize that they could be required to take those things out when they leave too, because you can't force the landlord to keep that big old ramp on the front of their home if they don't need it for the next person, you know? So the tenant might have to remove those things too. Next slide. So when we talk about service animals, there is no certification, there is no vest, there is nothing required for a service animal. I get that one all the time. All of it's a scam. All of it. The vests, the certificates, all of it. It's a scam. States cannot require it, and you need to check the ada.gov website for more information. Service animals must be trained, but they can be trained by the owner. I get that one a lot too. You gotta give me a certificate showing this dog was trained. No, I can train my dog myself. Thank you very much. Can be any size dog or small horse. Did you know there's a small horse trainer out in the Falcon area with the little, yeah, for the service animals? Has to be treated the same as any other assistive device. So a restaurant can't say, you got to leave your wheelchair out in the car, man. Right? Or you got to take your hearing aids out and leave them outside. You can't bring your hearing aids in. So it's the same with the service animal. You can't tell them you got to leave your service dog in the car. And when it comes to housing, there is no pet deposit allowed when you have a service animal. And when you do have a service animal, there's only 2 questions that can be asked. So I used to teach classes a lot, and if somebody came in with an animal, the only 2 things I could ask them is, number 1, is it a service animal? And number 2, what's it trained to do? Because you can imagine if I'm teaching a class and somebody brought in their service animal and the dog starts barking like crazy, right? I need to know that maybe that dog's doing its job, right? And I can't get mad at the person for having a barking dog if the dog's supposed to be barking. So those are the only 2 questions that I could ask. Next slide. Emotional support animals, on the other hand, a little bit different. When we're talking about housing, emotional support animals are allowed in housing, but pretty much not anywhere else. So you can see on the little chart there where emotional support animals have the same rights as service animals, and it's just for housing. There is no certification or vests for an emotional support animal either. Can be any reasonable animal. You can have an emotional support chicken if you would like. Any reasonable animal. I would not say a cow is reasonable, right? Because they're a little bit big, but a chicken, perfectly reasonable. And they're not allowed everywhere. So like it says there, but when it comes to housing, there's no deposit required, just like with a service animal. But they could require a letter of recommendation. So a letter of recommendation comes from somebody who is working with that tenant, typically a psychiatrist, psychologist, something like that. Could even be like if they're in Alcoholics Anonymous or something and their sponsor says that they would be better off with an emotional support animal. It would improve their quality of life. Then they could write that letter as well. Just does not need to include any medical records or anything like that. Just a general letter saying, I work with this person and I feel their life would be better with an emotional support animal. Next slide. But whoever, whether it's an emotional support animal or a service animal, no matter what, they do have to follow the rules. They still have to pick up after the animals in common areas, and your animal could be asked to leave if it's aggressive or not potty trained. And the same is true if somebody brought an emotional support animal, well, not an emotional support, a service animal here to a meeting. If the dog was pottying on the floor or trying to attack people, you could ask them to leave. And when it comes to the housing, you do have to pay for any damages that your animal causes. So if your emotional support kitty tears up the carpet, you got to pay for that stuff. Next slide. And those are the numbers that we give out for referrals. If you know somebody that has issues with any of the ADA stuff that I just discussed. And that's the end of that one. Any questions?
Yeah, does anyone have questions? I think I just have one.
Uh-huh.
So you said it's 4 or less units is when someone could,
Mm-hmm.
so there aren't any, I don't know, other than I guess you said the person can request sort of accommodations. There's no other like but you could deny it
Correct.
unless they're managed by a property company.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so somebody like
interesting.
my son's family owns like 3 houses in a row and they live in the middle one, they rent out the other 2. They would not be required. Usually in those cases though, you get to know your landlord and they're a little bit better about doing those things.
Yeah, small properties.
Yeah.
Good.
All right, so
Awesome.
a quick overview of the housing programs for El Paso County Economic Development. Next slide, please. So I'm the staff person for the El Paso County Housing Authority. We are a non-traditional housing authority. We do not own or manage anything. We're more like a housing finance authority. So our housing authority was started 33 years ago now, I believe, with the mission of managing the Housing Trust Fund. So the Housing Trust Fund stands at about 6 million, maybe 6 to 7, somewhere in there, currently. And it was started with single family bond proceeds back in the day. The county wanted to figure out a way to loan those out into the community to do some good with them. And the county can't loan money. So they came up with the housing authority to do that job. So we manage the housing trust fund. Next slide, please. So the Housing Trust Fund, part of that, most of that is a revolving loan fund that helps developers who want to build affordable housing. Could be used for some other stuff. I mean, we've helped out some nonprofits over the years and, done some interesting things with that Housing Trust Fund. But right now, our goal is the multifamily, the big stuff. And you can see there's some of the stuff we've done. We helped with Silver Key Apartments, Village at Solid Rock, also in the same zip code, Paloma Gardens, another senior one, Silver Keys seniors, and Academy Heights. They're all in the same neighborhood. So that housing trust fund, very flexible, gap financing for developers. They get all the big money, the tax credits and private activity bonds and all that to build their developments, and they need this little gap financing to fill in the pieces. And so ours is 200 to 500,000, and we let them pick the interest rate that they can meet with the development itself. So based on their rents and the other loans that they have to pay and all of that, we let them pick the interest rate. Next slide, please. Another part of that housing trust fund is our Pikes Peak down payment assistance program. So we do have a single family home ownership program. We help with down payment assistance so people can become homeowners. And you can see in the chart there that it started in 2012, 2013-ish, and it was going gangbusters back in the day. They were doing 500 loans a year, and that'd be like 10 a week. It was awesome. Now we're doing 5 a year, with interest rates and the cost of housing and all of that rolled into it. We just haven't done much, but I have flyers that I gave you all about our revamped program. It just came out in February. Pikes Peak down payment assistance used to be called Turnkey Plus. So I'm sure a lot of people heard of Turnkey, but now we're calling it Pikes Peak down payment assistance. And there is something new now just for this year. For the first 75 loans, we're doing a Hometown Heroes incentive. That is a 1% grant. Total grant, does not have to be repaid. And we're talking for like firemen and police officers and teachers and medical professionals and anybody assisting in those offices in any way. We want to help everybody. So like the lunch ladies and the school administrators and the janitors and whoever. So there's that. Next slide, please. Also out of our office, we do mortgage bonds. So the private activity bonds, that is where the county is holders of the bonds. We issue those for a development, raise some money off an investor. The investor gets tax-free income off of those bonds as long as the developer uses those developments for affordable housing. So when we get the affordable housing, the developer gets their stuff built and the investor gets tax-free income off of that. So it's a nice trade-off for everybody. We get private activity bonds based off of population. So we get about 14, 15 million a year. The city of Colorado Springs gets about 35 million because they got much higher population than we do. So they run their own program. We do that in collaboration though, lots of collaboration there. We also ask Fountain. Fountain is big enough to get their own private activity bonds, but they only get about 2 million. And you can see in the pictures there, this is for very, very, very large developments, 200, 300 units, because of how that money has to be managed and all the hands that are in it. It's really not feasible to do a small development. So that 2 million that Fountain gets isn't really useful for Fountain. So we ask them to sign it over to the El Paso County so we can keep it local, keep the money here and do more developments with it. So we get about 2 million from them. And you can see there the examples for different developments that we've done. Next slide, please. Another thing I do is I go out and do the affirmatively furthering fair housing. So I've done chats and you can see there's a picture of me doing the presentation. Next slide. And then the last thing, I give out resources. So I do that all the time. I tell people about where they can call to get certain things. So you can see we've got resources on our website. And then I also started something last year, our affordable housing directory. So I went out and found all of the places that I know of that have some kind of subsidy in them. That means they have to have at least a portion of the units that are affordable for families. And I put them on a map and you can see there it's color coded. There's all sorts of different things you can look at, like we all know about Gracio Housing, right? Gracio Housing, the largest nonprofit around that does affordable rentals. Well, if you've applied to Gracio, you've applied to Gracio, right? You've applied to all of their units in one application. So you can turn off the Gracio layer so you can look at all the other stuff. Same with the Colorado Springs Housing Authority. When you apply to them, you've applied to them, right? You're on their waiting list. So if you want to turn off that layer and focus on the other stuff, you can. Next slide. And that's it. Thank you so much. Any questions? Yes.
Thank you so much. Really helpful. Do you mind going back, Zach, to so first questions here. So you inventoried every single family, multifamily,
They're all
Mobile home-
multifamily,
They're all multifamily.
subsidized. So they've got some kind of federal or state or local funding in them that means they must have at least a portion of them affordable for families.
And is it literally in a database that you help create?
Yes.
Is that accessible to?
I'd be happy to share. It's not all that large,
Mhm.
you know, I need to add to it, but it's not all that large
Yeah,
currently.
that's amazing. And then, and Zach, if you go back a couple more slides. How do you, yeah, perfect. How do you want us to think about private activity bonds and low income tax credits? Are they close cousins? Are they one and the same?
Very close cousins. So when it comes to the private activity bonds, at least half of the program or development has to be out of private activity bonds, and then they automatically come with a 4% low income housing tax credit as well. So that's another piece of that gap after the 50% private activity bonds, then the LIHTC is a little piece of the
And
gap.
is your team involved with the LIHTC piece too?
We are
Yeah,
not,
okay.
just the private activity bond
That's
piece.
great. Yeah,
They
that's
still
helpful.
have to apply to CHAFA for the LIHTC part.
Have I hit my quota yet, or do I get another one? Zach, could you go back to, this is helpful. You mentioned that the volume of interest has gone down with
Yes.
this program. But when I see that there's a 0% interest rate, is that just a function of, so the interest rate, it's not correlated to the interest rate because the interest rate is 0. So if I'm a home buyer,
So when it says 0% interest rate, that's, it goes from 0 to 5% for the down payment assistance alone. They still get a 30-year fixed rate, fixed rate mortgage from the lender as well.
gotcha.
That covers the main part of it, like the 400,000 to buy the home. So they still get a loan there, but then it comes with the down payment assistance. Ours is a silent second. It's fully forgivable. So the first half is forgiven at 5 years. So 1/60th per month for 5 years. And the second half is forgiven at the 30-year mark.
Gotcha.
So comparing it to the CHAFA down payment assistance programs, they're not forgivable. Just saying.
And just for us from an housing advisory board perspective,
Mhm.
your housing trust fund, that's for El Paso County.
Yes.
And how is that funded? Is it financed through every municipality within?
No, so our housing trust fund is revolving. So when I talk about the gap funding, it's loans to those developers. So can you go back one more,
I
please?
see.
So those developers for Academy Heights, he's paying us back that loan with interest. That's what's covering our revolving housing trust fund. It
Interesting.
has to be a loan and there has to be some kind of interest. We're very flexible about it. It says 1 to 3%. Typically, I'd say half of them are 3% and half of them are 2% these days, but there have been some at 1.
But where does the initial sort of seed capital come from?
That was the single family bond proceeds 30 some years ago.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah,
there-
super helpful. Thank you.
There
That's all my
was
questions.
also a one-time infusion from the county from ARPA funds. It was about 2 million, happened January 2022, I believe. But other than that, nobody's given us anything.
Thanks so much.
Mhm.
Super helpful.
I have a question. So it looks like the majority of the funding sort of opportunities that the county holds, are they for larger developments versus people that are trying to do smaller?
Yes, we keep the Pikes Peak down payment assistance to help with the single family stuff, but yes, the rest of it is gonna be the larger. But there's like Gracio sometimes does a complex that only has 20 units.
Oh, okay.
And we've done those too.
Oh, so it just means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
they
was
don't have to be-
talking to Springs Rescue Mission a couple months ago. They're trying to do another one of those little motels. So we were talking about that. We're willing to do all that kind of stuff too.
Okay.
So you're seeing sort of mobile or motels sort of
Mhm.
repurposed and refashioned and reimagined.
Yeah, Springs Rescue Mission just did one. It's beautiful.
I'll have to go to. Yeah, that's awesome. Anyone on the screen, even guests are welcome, as well as my audience members, if anyone has questions for Randy.
Yeah, I have a quick question, and I apologize. I do have a toddler that's discovering she doesn't like lentils in the background, so you may hear her. But yeah, the resources and affordable housing directory, that's really, really cool. Really appreciate the work you put into that. But looking at some of the different programs, like the Housing Trust Fund, it looks like that is funding going to developers. The down payment assistance is essentially money going to home sellers, and the multifamily mortgage bond is more money going to developers. Has there been any thought or interest in the county to develop a type of public housing where that money is kept within the county itself?
So it looks like the money is going to the developers, but the reason for that is so that they can keep the rents low. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to keep the rents low. So it's not like we're lining their pockets with funds. It is going to those developments to keep the rents low for at least 30 years from our point of view.
So there
And
has
that-
not been any interest in some type of public housing investment with those
Not-
funds?
Not from the county. The county does not want to own or manage anything. We do not want to be property owners. We don't want to get involved in the private market. And if you know our county commissioners, they are very strong in that. They do not want to be involved in the private market at all. They don't want to. So this is as close as we can get. We help those developers.
Okay, thanks.
Randy, can you talk about, like, you said that 30 years. So can you explain a little bit more about what that means for the developers and the housing project? Like when they take the loan, what do they have to give back, if that makes sense? Like, what are they agreeing to?
So when they apply, they let us know what their conditions are going to be, like how many units are going to be affordable to a family of making 30% of the area median income, and how many units are going to be at 40% and how many at 50%. And we require them to keep it that way for 30 years. It's a land use restriction agreement that we make them sign. Yes.
Is it just rentals? Sorry, I know people can't hear online. Is it just for rentals or is it for sale?
It's just for rentals. The for sale part of it is the down payment assistance program that we have. That's the
Okay.
only part that we do for sale.
Okay, so that would just be, that's not for the developer, that's for the people who are
Single-family
purchasing.
homeowners.
Okay, single family.
Mhm.
Okay, so for a developer, which is kind of what I'm interested in here, it would be for rental pieces. Okay, okay, that's very, very helpful. And it's just, and then it's, where do you come in with the capital stack portion, in the very beginning or
At the
after
very beginning.
Jaffa?
At closing.
Oh,
With
at
everybody
closing?
else at closing. Mhm.
Okay, so if the conversations have already been had with Jaffa, are you kind of before or after that kind of
So
piece?
we have 2 application cycles.
Okay.
Our next one is coming up on May 1st, and here, you can shoot me a
Thank you.
message, and I'm having a webinar on April 10th, I believe it is, to go over the application and answer any questions. And May 1st is the next application cycle.
And
that
when's the
we'll be
one
looking at.
after that?
November 1st.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
And will you say again, those were for what? What was she asking about and these dates?
So the Housing Trust Fund, and private activity bonds both. We have one application for those, and we accept applications on May 1st and November 1st every year.
Okay,
And this year we are accepting private activity bond applications on May 1st. We had used up all of our money last year, so we didn't accept any on November 1st.
Got it. Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions? Oh,
Yeah,
Nancy,
but-
sorry.
It's okay. Given your first presentation, this is probably a stupid question, but I'll ask it anyway. Given that the city has invested via the Urban Renewal Authority has invested a whole lot of money into a potential development for low-income housing, is there any way to give priority to Manitou residents in that housing?
I'm not sure I understand the question. We're always interested from the county's perspective on being outside of city of Colorado Springs limits. We can do housing trust fund. You can see all of those are in city
Right.
limits. We're actually in talks with somebody to do something here in Manitou. They've already applied for the low income housing tax credits and they've come to us looking to do an application on May 1st. So we're absolutely thrilled to get something outside of city of Colorado Springs limits.
Yes, and I believe we're talking about the same project probably. But my point is that through taxpayer dollars have paid a lot already for this project. So how, is there a way to, again, give priority for the to rent those units if and when they're built for Manitou residents as opposed to, Colorado Springs residents?
Aaron's correct. We don't get involved in any of that. That's up to whoever the developer is and who's managing it.
Okay, so they wouldn't fall into the fair housing unit stuff?
No, that wouldn't be a Fair Housing Act violation at all.
Okay, all right, thank you. That's potentially better news than I was expecting.
I want to add that it does depend what other funders are in there, because that information for the Division of Housing does not like preferences in your tenant selection plan. So it really depends on who has money in the project.
Yeah. And just to clarify, normally I wouldn't either. It's just, there's been a heavy investment and it's our first shot at affordable housing, really. So thank you.
Just a question, Randy, on your digging of the affordable housing like map.
Mhm.
When I tried to just do my Google search, I don't think we have any in Manitou, do we?
Yeah, no.
Nope. So, okay. At least I was appropriate in my article.
I mean, there's some getting towards old Colorado City, but no.
All right. Anyone else?
You have another quick question. Can any of these funding sources be used to build condos that will then be sold to individuals?
Right now they're targeted towards the rentals. Like I said, we're interested in hearing other application prospects. If you want to discuss a different type of project, we'd love to hear it, but right now they're focused mostly on those multifamily rentals.
Great, thank you.
I just had a quick question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Amy.
I saw that the down payment assistance capped at 410. Is that has that been changed, or when was the last time that was amended, or does that change every year?
Second. Okay, so it's just statistics from the program, and when those numbers were run, the maximum purchase price of a home so far had been 410,000. I'm assuming it's probably more than that now. I haven't, we've only had a few loans every year, and I don't remember running those numbers personally, so it could be a little bit higher now. But that's an average too, so. There is no maximum purchase price for our program.
Fred has a question.
Actually, I don't have a question. I just wanted to note we have a number of attendees who are zooming in. And so if there are any attendees who have questions, just raise your virtual hand and we can allow you to speak.
Well, thank you for your time. And yeah, if, I don't know, you have those copies. Did anyone want any, like a hard copy of anything? Yeah, a few people asked if they could have some, so. Excellent. All right. Well, then, our next presentation is from Aaron McNabb. So happy that you were here.
Hi, my name is Erin McNabb. I'm a housing development specialist with the Division of Housing, Office of Housing Finance and Sustainability. Sorry, we have a lot of long words. Thank you for having me here. I'm happy to tell you more kind of about our programs and our process. You can go to the next slide. So just a little of agenda. I'll talk about our mission, give you a quick overview of funding, application instructions and requirements, how to submit one, and best practice tips. It is a process, so, all right, good. All right, so as you can see, our mission is to partner with local communities to create housing opportunities for Coloradans who face the greatest challenges to accessing affordable, safe, and secure homes. We do that in a multitude of ways. In my office specifically, like I said, we're the Office of Housing Finance and Sustainability, so we're a gap financer. Go ahead. All right, so like I said, gap financing, we tend to come in with our funding at the very end of the project. We want you to talk to us immediately, but our funding isn't going to be coming in until after everything else is there. We use federal and state funds. So depending on the application cycle and where we are, we use the National Housing Trust Fund, which is not the same as what the county has. We have Home Investment Partnership Program, or we just call it HOME, CDBG, and then our state funds, we have our Housing Development Grant. We also have our Proposition 123. And then along with that, we sometimes have sporadic other funds that come in for state funds. However, our HDG Housing Development Grant and our Prop 123 are the two main ones we have right now. So you work with your development specialist throughout the application process. You can ask for a specific type of funds. However, during our underwriting, we kind of determine, like, not even during your application process, we're having conversations about what the best type of funding might be for that project. It's very, like, we're going to be getting deep into that. And then through our underwriting, that will help determine it as well. Those funds can be either grants or loans, depending on the entity. If it's a nonprofit, it can be a grant or a loan, depending on the project and how that looks in the underwriting. For profits, it's only loans, but they do tend to be low interest loans. Sometimes we have funding sources that are hard pay. Most of our funds on the state side are cash flow. Let's see. So from the time of application, it's about 3 months. We have a basically new bill that was introduced and went into effect September 1st called 1308. And that says specifically what our timeframes are, which is why you work with your housing development specialist heavily upfront prior to application. So, because you just don't have a whole lot of time to fix things after you apply. And just like El Paso County, we put a 30-year use covenant on all of our properties that we put funding into that restricts what you can use the property for, what those area median incomes are for specific units. Whatever you tell us you're going to build that we have approved, that's what you have to do for 30 years. All right, next. All right, like I said, we do some rental and home ownership. Multifamily and single family for both rental and home ownership, new construction, acquisition with or without rehab. We also have mobile home park programs now where we help with acquisition, or infrastructure repairs, permanent supportive housing, and then revolving loan funds. So those are typically for our down payment assistance and our single family owner occupied rehab programs. However, those don't go directly to homeowners through us. We partner with local agencies to provide those funds. Go ahead. All right, so we have maximum subsidies per unit is how we do it. So unlike the Housing Trust Fund, which has a max total, we have a maximum per unit. So if you have a 132 unit property, you could ask for a very large amount of money. Whether or not we have that amount of money is another story. So for our rental home ownership state funds and federal funds, just typically our housing development grant and other assorted state programs, and our home HTF programs, 50,000 per unit in our urban areas, 55 in our rural areas, and 60 in our rural resort areas. Our Prop 123 homeownership program, which requires that your community has opted in, Manitou has, just putting that out there. El Paso County has not. And probably couldn't make them if I wanted to. But Manitou and Colorado Springs have. So that is an option. That is 70,000 per unit, regardless of the area. And what I didn't put on the slide is there's also the possibility of a 10% addition to that to meet a couple of different things. The biggest one is really modular. There's a modular bonus if you use modular building. Permanent supportive housing is 60 across the board because it's lower. Permanent supportive housing is usually our 30% units. They need a higher subsidy. And because there's services involved as well, they just need more subsidy. And then mobile homes are 50 in urban and 55 in rural and rural resort. Right, go ahead. All right, so your first step is talking to your housing development specialist. In the city of Manitou Springs, that is me. So you want to talk to me. And like I said, you want to talk to me early. I want to start talking to you at project concept. We won't be coming in with funding till later, but I want to be there to make sure that you are ready to apply when it's time. You're going to want to review the application schedule. Right now, we are on a quarterly application schedule. However, that quarterly application schedule is not a specific quarterly application schedule, meaning, so this again came in with 1308 September 1st. We started our rounds. We have to publish them ahead of time. We started our rounds and we had a December round. Well, we have specific timelines we have to hit from application through contracting. And in December, you can't get a hold of anybody. So we are not going to do a December round this year. That's all I know. The new schedule will be published on March 1st on our website. Not March 1st, I'm sorry, May 1st. Wrong month, we're in March. So I'm not sure what that's going to look like yet. All I've been told is no December this year. You're going to want to double check the application checklist. We have a very large amount of application required documents. And I have a slide that goes over some of them, but it's a lot of work. And some of those documents are going to take a long time to get. Like a specific one is getting a phase 1 environmental assessment. That can take a while to get your phase 1. It can take a while to get a market study. So it's one of those things where that's why we want you talking to me early. You're going to review the budget spreadsheet because looking at that budget spreadsheet is going to help you determine, your market study is going to help you determine what the area needs for area median income and unit size. Your budget spreadsheet is going to determine how you can get your project to pencil, and you can use that to plug your units in and figure out if it's even feasible to do that with what your budget is and what your funding sources are. It's a great tool. That's also something I can work through with you because it is like any spreadsheet until you've gone through it a few times. It's got a bit of a learning curve. We have our application instructions, and one of our biggest changes is we now have competitive application rounds. So after COVID, everybody had stimulus funds and ARPA funds, and the state of Colorado was the same. And we were like Oprah, everybody got money. And now all the ARPA funds are just gone, like almost all at once. And so now we don't have the money to give to everybody. So we do have scoring criteria on the website. It is a great tool to look at that because it tells you exactly how to get either the no points, the medium points, or the high points, exactly what you have to have in your application. So it is very clear what you have to do. And again, we'll have those conversations to make sure that your project, whatever works for your project, is as competitive as possible, because there's some things you're not going to hit. One of our bonus points is that you're building a childcare center on the property. Some places just aren't. Like, that's a very specific thing. Most people aren't going to get that bonus point. But like I said, work with me throughout the process. If you're not communicating, it's likely we're going to miss something. All right, go ahead. All right, so here's a map of the housing development specialist. Forgive the blurry words. I don't know why we cannot get a better map. Not sure why. My area is the Seafoam Green area. So I cover all of those counties. If you know anybody in those counties who need to talk to me, I'm here. But yeah, so I have Fremont all the way to Kit Carson, all the way down to Baca. So spent a lot of time out on the Eastern Plains and just seeing the state. So, but this is on our website as well, if you need anybody else. So go ahead. All right. So like I said, it's a quarterly application cycle that will be published May 1st. LOIs are due 45 days prior to application. And with your LOIs, we also need a preliminary budget spreadsheet, and you have to do a pre-application in our online system, which is part of why talking to me at Concept's important, so that when you're ready to apply, we can be making sure those things are ready. I can be opening the application in our system, because you can't just get in. I have to open it for you. You don't have to submit your application till 11:59 on the due date. So you've got a little wiggle room. Nobody wants to work till 11:59, but I have found that that's important for people. So same with the LOIs, 11:59. So after submission, you have a 10-day threshold review from the underwriter. This is where those timelines get real short. They review, make sure you meet threshold, meaning your application has everything filled out and is answered correctly. You have all of those application documents in from the application checklist. Your budget looks good. They're just basically checking everything. On day 10, they'll give you a list of what they need, and you have 7 days to cure it. So certain things, like I said, if you don't have your environmental, 7 days isn't enough time to get that. You will be sent back to Concept if you can't meet threshold and have to reapply in another round. The application is then scored. Then we have an internal review committee, and then it goes to State Housing Board for review and approval. So that can take, we got about 90 days from, and I lied, I said 90 days from application, and I meant 90 days from State Housing Board is the time frame. So from application to State Housing Board can be longer. We still try to make that internal review period as short as possible for people. So usually about 6 months from application at the most. And another big piece is if you use our no negotiation contracts, it can go even faster because then they don't need 3 months of going back and forth with you and your lawyer and your lender and all of those things to get through the process. All right, next. All right, so these are just some of the application attachments that are needed. Depends on the type of project it is. Some of those are you know, specific for federal funds. Some of those are for state funds. Again, it's talking with me, working through that, and I can let you know what's necessary, what isn't for your project. Go ahead. All right, other requirements, energy standards. So especially in more urban areas, we want to see high energy efficiency standards. Smaller projects can be a little different, but especially on the bigger projects and in urban areas, we've also learned in more rural areas that meeting those energy requirements is harder. Single family also doesn't work to get some of the certifications, but we still want to see you make an effort. Like I said, the environmental review, long-term affordability, so that's that use covenant. Fair Housing Act and Section 504. So we want to see those are only required for federal. However, we still want to see them on the state side, on state funding sources. We just aren't necessarily as strict. However, we do have scoring criteria around them. And Universal Relocation and Real Property Acquisition Act is only relevant if you are doing rehab and have to move somebody out of a unit, and it's for federal funds. But just know that we have other requirements. Some are cross-cutting, federal cross-cutting, some are just internal state requirements. Go ahead. All right, so here's some resources. Our funding application website, great resource. We also have tons of trainings on our website. We have list of our funding sources. Just, I don't know, there's a ton of information there. Sign up for the DOH newsletter. Just go to our website and sign up for the newsletter. Great information coming through. And then, like I said, reach out to me. There's my contact information. I also have cards with me. Any questions? I'm sure there is other stuff I missed, but I was trying to keep it not too long for you guys. Go ahead.
It's kind of a question for both you ladies. I know that Manitou and the city of Colorado Springs have opted into Prop 1-2 funds and El Paso County has not. Do you know the reason, like the main reason? Because I'd never have gotten one. There's few. Thank
So
you.
one of the requirements for Prop 123 is that you take an inventory of the housing that you currently have, and then you agree that over a certain period of time, you're going to increase it by a certain amount. El Paso County will not be held by that. We believe in free market, and if people will build, they will build. And we have seen from the city of Colorado Springs that they are prioritizing their Prop 123 developments over other funding that could go to other things. And we don't want to be like that. Like rehab projects do not count towards Prop 123. So the city is not funding rehab projects because they don't count towards Prop 123 and they need to increase their numbers for Prop 123. So we don't feel that that's something the county would like to agree to at this point.
Thank you.
Just Randy, you said something. So when you say rehab project, so like we were talking about like a motel redevelopment, is that considered a rehab? Like
No, that
wouldn't count toward a Prop 123.
That would probably be an acquisition rehab. They have to buy it and rehab it.
Got it.
Right, so that would be adding units and it would
Okay.
count towards Prop 123. Now, if you already own an apartment complex and you needed to rehab it, then that would not count.
Nancy has a question.
Thanks. Regarding Prop 123, when we applied, was it 45 or 47 units that we are required to? Yeah, that's important because currently I think the developer was looking at 43 units. And for that big project that we hope, big project for us that we hoping will happen. At least I'm hoping it will happen. So my question is this, will we be held to that exactly? If like one or two off, would that be a problem? And as Fred's looking, yes, of course it will be, Nancy, of course. And secondly, my second question is, the dates will be, because I believe if we don't have them built, and I want to know exactly what it is that has to be done by the end of 2025, because we had 2 years to get it done, correct? Otherwise, we're eliminated from Prop 123 funding for 2026.
So I believe it's by the end of 2026, and I'm not an expert on some of the dates and stuff. We actually have a Prop 123 team who can actually walk you through that. Really, like they know everything about it.
Okay. We need to
but-
check on that because my thought, what I was thinking it was 2 years and we applied in 2023.
It's
3 years. Oh,
yeah, it
that
was
would be much
initially
better.
3 years. Yeah.
Thank you. That's a relief. Okay.
Yeah, it was initially 3 years, and yes, you need to hit your number or you can't get Prop 123 funding for 1 year. And it's only Prop 123 funding.
Right.
You can get any other type of funding into your community. Any other state funding is fine. You just can't get Prop 123 for 1 year.
Okay.
And then you can recommit.
Okay. Well, hopefully we'll not be constrained by that. And then my third question is also pertaining to Prop 123 and you may not know this, but early on, we had looked at doing a needs assessment for how much really we know that we needed the 45 or 47 or whatever the top number was. But to again, go back in and see how much our actual need is within the community.
I'm not sure what the
Well,
question-
I'm sorry, yeah. There was 123 funding available to perhaps hire someone to maybe work with the planning department
Mhm.
to really look at the assessment of what's available in Manitou and what we might need and to help with the.
Yes, and I'm trying to remember who that is through. So what? Okay, in DLG, I had to think about it. So our Prop 123 funding is in the state's Prop 123 is in multiple agencies. So we have the Department of Local Affairs. Within the Department of Local Affairs are multiple divisions. I'm in the Division of Housing. Robin DeFalco is in the Division of Local Government. And then they have the planning grant that can help with that. We have, in the Division of Housing, we have home ownership specific funds, but we also
Okay.
have some pre-development funds for home ownership. But it's only nonprofits and nonprofits, housing authorities, local governments can apply, and there might be a third category that can apply for the pre-development funds. And same for our home ownership Prop 123. For-profit developers cannot apply for it unless the applicant has to be a local government or nonprofit. So technically, OEdit was given the equity and all the rental funds, but then they partnered with CHFA to administer those. So CHFA has all the equity, land banking, and rental Prop 123. So it's a bit of all over the place. Go ahead.
Can I give you Robin's number?
Sure.
She has money. She told me, I heard, I was with her at a conference, they have money.
Hear that,
Um,
Fred?
Robin's phone number 720-682-5202. And her and I have disagreements about Prop 123 in El Paso County all the time. Love her to death. Tell her Randy said to call you.
Anyway, my last question is somewhat, I guess, philosophical, because the housing and building these financing plans and so on are so confusing, and I so appreciate you guys being here to assist us. And what recommendations might you have for Manitou to, because historically, we've been terrible at attracting developers. And I'm not even sure, that's why I brought up the planning grant, because I'm not even sure what our actual needs are, not just for large developments, but for housing, rehab of individual houses and what, because we've got a huge historic housing stock that becomes very problematic as people just let them deteriorate. So I guess what would you recommend to us as to this housing advisory board as to what steps we might be able to take to serve our community better?
So I would definitely suggest getting that housing needs assessment completed, or the housing needs assessment for the community. A big reason that will help is, one, you need that market study or housing needs assessment to apply to the Division of Housing for funds. And if the community has done it, that's good for a year, which means as long as it covers what you're building, any of your builders can use it. And lowers the cost just a little bit, because none of those, outside of the pre-development funding we have, none of those costs are reimbursable. We only do the construction, like I said, the construction, acquisition, and rehab, and sometimes infrastructure, but it's kind of depends. It's mostly on the mobile homes. But definitely get that done. Another piece is for the aging stock. Next time we have our an application window open for single owner occupied rehab funds, if you have either the city itself or a local nonprofit or somebody who would want to administer those, apply. Like, the city of Pueblo manages their own. In Colorado Springs, it's different. I can't remember who the nonprofit is who does is it Brothers who does ours? Okay. And then in some places, land trusts do them, but they do, like, in some of our smaller communities, the land trusts do both. It just kind of depends. But yeah, if you have either the city or an organization that wants to do that, get those rehab dollars to help homeowners to rehab. The other thing is, if the city owns land, or if you know the school district owns land, partner to build. I think that's a big thing, especially Manitou. I will say my impression of Manitou prior to hearing that there were some things, talking to some developers and learning about some of the things that are going on, is I wasn't aware that Manitou had anywhere available to build because you go up the mountain. So it kind of just looks like it's full.
It's pretty well, developed. There's not much. I think there were, last I heard, was about 14 acres of developable land. And that wasn't necessarily desirable developable land.
Fair enough.
So, well, thank you. Randy, did you have anything else to add to that?
I think it's great that you're taking advantage of the Prop 123 and just using whatever advantages you can get out of that. There's other funds out there as well, like Aaron was talking about, and just take advantage of everything that you can get a hold of, especially since we need to get the housing in here. I think that helps your applications. It elevates your applications a bit since the housing is so needed over here.
Yeah. And my sense is we have a lot of need, but we just have no concept or bandwidth to figure out how to utilize all these assets that are out there. So if we could get that planning person but I don't know if we've got the bandwidth either and take on an extra employee. So that's, you know, there's always something.
Another thing I'm going to suggest is if you guys don't have the capacity to, like, you want to build the affordable housing, you don't have the capacity to figure out how all the funding stack, all those pieces go together, how to go to an application. Like, my role is to be there to help, at least for us a bit, but I can't be like your full-time consultant on it and tell you everything. Hire a consultant. Ratio works with consultants on some of their projects. Like, truly, get a consultant. You can find many consulting firms, just as a trick. I can't refer anyone specifically, can ask Ratio, who they've worked with. But also, if you look at the Housing Colorado members list on their website, you can find which ones are consulting firms and see who's out there. So that's helpful.
Yeah, and I'll just say, and this is not critical to you, but it is critical to the board. As you know, Colorado Springs just approved recreational marijuana.
Mhm.
And so our budget is going to probably take a tremendous hit. So money is going to be even more constrained than it historically has been for the past few years. So to hire somebody on our own is going to be challenging at best, but thank you.
Yeah. No, I get that. The other option too is to work with an experienced affordable housing developer. So I know that Grescio has managed other people's properties. I know that there are people out there who will partner not for a paycheck but for a portion of the profit, the developer fees and that part of it. So there are options. Just kind of depends.
I don't see anyone up there. I have a question about, could you have any more information on that mobile home like acquisition or the thing that you had mentioned, or would that be the Prop 123 team?
No, I can tell you a little bit about that. So
Okay.
we do the funds for acquisition. The Prop 123 team does the regulatory side of it. Not the Prop 123 team, sorry. No, they do the getting people signed up. We have our MPOP. So mobile home park something. Sorry, we have so many acronyms and like I said, really long names. Like my office is OFIS is what we say, because it's long. But so with that acquisition, there's three different types of ways they can be acquired. One, the residents can create their own co-op and purchase the park. Typically, they're working with Thistle and Rock USA. Two, a nonprofit can purchase the park. Or three, the local government can purchase the park. And they're the ones who can apply for Prop 123 funds to help with that purchasing of the park and or acquisition. I do believe, and I'm seeing it in a couple of places, trying to remember how it worked because it wasn't my area. It's not one I worked on. But down in the San Luis Valley, there's a nonprofit working to help them do a park. And I don't know if they had to also create a co-op. I think they might have. But I don't remember if that is a requirement if a nonprofit's purchasing. I just know that it has to be an entity that is committed to keeping it affordable. So that's the co-op, nonprofit, or local government. Yeah, and it can't be RVs. Yep, I just want to put that out there because there's a lot of RV parks up and down this
Oh,
way,
yeah.
so.
No, we know, but we do have one, property that could be,
Just so you know, last year at CML, the Colorado Municipal League, there was an outstanding presentation on a public-private partnership to uplift a very similar looking trailer park. And I don't remember where it was now, but I could find that for you and send it to you.
okay, yeah, it's worth a conversation. So, yes,
Thanks so much, Aaron.
No problem.
Super helpful. Question on, just a broad directional question on going into an application cycle. What's sort of the absolute number of applications that your region or more broadly receives? Is it 20? Is it 30? Is it 100?
Per cycle? Well, I don't know that I could tell you specifically off the top of my head. I know for our March 3rd round, I received 3 development applications and 2 pre-development applications. We just had LOIs on Monday and I received 1.5. I'm gonna say the half is because it was a preemptive from one who applied in March, just in case they needed to reapply because the timing, they didn't have answers before. So I was like, just submit another LOI just in case. So this time it was much lower. Applications aren't due for a couple of weeks, but I haven't heard anybody coming to me recently for pre-development funds. It just depends, but I also saw one of my coworkers had 6 development LOIs come in this round. Another one had 2. It depends on the timing. And it depends on what funds are available. So we don't have all funds available all application rounds. The other part of it is our down payment assistance and single family owner occupied go through. We don't take those applications as housing development specialist. Those we would connect you. Those go through an RFA through our home ownership team. And then our pre-development funds, I know we're supposed to have another round, but we did an RFA form as well. So it hasn't been published yet for the next round. So
No,
I
that's
can't
great.
really, it just
No, that's
depends.
helpful. I mean, it's somewhat encouraging. I thought the number was going to be, when you said competitive bids, that there'd be 30 or 40,
Good.
applications coming across your desk. So it sounds like there's still a probability to be successful if you apply. I'm kind of picking that up from Randy too.
Absolutely. There is, like I said, that's part of what I try to help make you successful. One nice thing is all LOIs get published to the website. So they're on our application page. So you can see who applied in March. I will tell you, for our rental applications, we had 3 times the amount of funding we had available requested. We had about double for the home ownership projects requested in March. I have not seen the full LOI list. I mean, I've seen our internal one, but I haven't seen the published list go up for because you can see everybody who's applied, what they're going to build, how much they've asked for on that LOI list.
No, that visibility is great. And then are you seeing interest among cities to purchase properties? You mentioned that. Are you just seeing a general pickup in interest with the cities that you're working with, like Manitou?
For the most part, I'm seeing nonprofits or co-ops for the mobile home parks. I'm not seeing a ton in the way of cities and towns so far. I know a lot of them want to work on it. I'm often seeing, at least on the Eastern Plains, the economic development offices are the ones really getting involved in it, because they don't have, city might have an admin and a maintenance person, and that's it. They're lucky if they have that much. So I'm not really seeing cities get involved. It's usually the housing authorities or developers.
Gotcha. Thank you.
The question.
Yeah.
And it sounds like from funding both from the county and from the state, that like certain ways it's used, we're getting a maximum of 30 years of affordable housing. Where is that coming from? Is that legislated or?
On federal funds, they give you a specific timeline depending on the type of funds, and then we add on to that to make it 30. I don't know what that is specifically. I think part of the thought process, just based on something someone said, but I don't know if it's the actual thought process, was that at about 30 years, you're going to need to rehab that property and you're going to come back to us for funding. And then we're going to put another use covenant on it for another 30 years and so forth and so on. So, you know, after 30 years, you're going to have some wear and tear.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Any thought from you?
I just have one more question that I keep asking. So we do have like churches or small like places that have like, you know, either a small like home that needs to, that they're talking about wanting to convert or maybe property. What funds are available for people that are like wanting to do small builds?
So I will say small builds, technically they can come to us for funding. Our due diligence requirements can make that a little more challenging because they're costly up front.
Okay.
We also, all of our funding is on reimbursement basis and we can't reimburse anything that was done prior to contract execution. So that's hard for small ones. However, we do have our Affordable Housing Investment Fund, which we use to fund local lenders. So those lenders, one of the ones we did this year, and I don't know who still has money, but one of the ones we did this year was Pikes Peak Real Estate Foundation. Provided them some money. I also know they have grants for some for housing. But that's a local one. There's also, there's a whole list on the website, but Impact Development Fund, Southwest Regional Bank, a bunch of others, but we give them a certain pot of money and we tell them what the max interest they can charge is. And I don't know specifically what the max interest is because we don't have it published anywhere. But they can choose to be at the max or they can choose to be under. But I think the highest I've heard somebody getting a loan through them is about 3.5.
Love to hear any questions. No, awesome.
Absolutely.
All right, anyone online, any attendees there have questions? I don't see any hands raised, so I think we appreciate you. We appreciate your time and the resources for you know, future calls too. So thank you so much for being here. We just have a couple more things on our agenda. It's really just like our April meeting agenda. Was curious what we want to plan, what's important, since now we've heard these presentations, if anything has stirred a future conversation. What do we need to keep working on? Crystal?
I would be really interested, and I don't know if this is necessarily, but finding more about the mobile home park, kind of what their needs are, what their, who owns it, all that kind of stuff, to see if that could be a possibility to like help with that. Cause that too would also up our Prop 123 numbers.
That's awesome. And Nancy, you said you could look to see. Okay, and then I felt like on something I sent out, wasn't the one I was sending you to. What am I'm having, Glenn go to some little conference. But I remembered on the email I sent, there was something about mobile homes too, about probably was your little newsletter that comes at you. Sending him to one, maybe you sent in Palmer Lake.
Oh, not that one. We do have some virtual mobile home ones. We had two, and I think we have a third one coming up, and they are being advertised through our newsletter. I was going to mention we have a monthly webinar series that is not necessarily every month. It kind of depends on what's out there, but we do have training for both developers, property managers, pretty much about the whole process. We do fair housing, all cross-cutting, all sorts of things. So sign up for our newsletter and you can, like, we put everything in there. It's kind of great.
Great. So yeah, yeah, we can, let's put that on. I don't know, I'll just see what I can find if people have things. I know we have that Google Drive. I haven't really looked at that. Leah sent something out. Does anyone? I think so, but I don't know if it got like sent out to people. Did anyone get out? People are like, no. So Amy or Aaliyah had to drop off, so I can follow back up with her. And then I know Nate has attended a few things, so maybe at April meeting, he could give some reports on some of the things that he's learned. So we'll just do those type of things. I think we'll put the mobile home thing. I think it is a good research opportunity. And then Nathan, and then yours is, when is the one that you're going to?
April 3rd.
Okay, so probably by the time you could maybe give a little report on that. So, okay.
Just Ellie, you may want to invite Rick Hudson to the next one if you're going to discuss the mobile home park.
All right. We could do that. Anyone know him enough to like, I have his Facebook thing, but
Do we
Okay.
know anyone else that lives in the trailer park at all?
you do?
I'm asking anyone in this whole room.
I felt like I might be aware of someone that lives there, but
Okay, thank you.
what was your question stemming from? You were just. Okay, all right.
I know there's sometimes some drama on Facebook surrounding that name. So I don't know if that's
All right.
something.
We'll
There
just,
there certainly is, but
yeah,
yeah, I'll sit next to him.
okay.
If you
we'll
invite, if
just-
he
yeah,
comes.
got it. We got it. All right. Thank you all. I think we'll just go ahead and call it a meeting, 7:01. Thanks for everyone's attendance and participation. Thank you.